Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Calavoda, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hi, y'all. This is Sasha here for 2 quick announcements before we get on to our interview for today. First of all, if you are looking for quality supplements, quality tonic herbs, some specialty food items, and you're in and around Calgary, then please go check out Lotus Herbal Health, a great family-run store that has 2 locations in Calgary. You can find them at lotusherbalhealth.ca to find out where their locations are, or you can shop online and they will pretty much deliver anywhere. So quality supplements, tonic herbs, great staff. Check out lotusherbalhealth.ca. Secondly, I want to announce the relaunch of my program called Your Conscious Pregnancy and Parenting Guide, which consists of experts in their fields around the world on consciousness and parenting and education and nutrition and dentistry and homeopathy and more. This is a program I created after my son was born about 10 years ago, a little bit more than that. And I am now very concerned after the events of 2020 for our future generations. And I believe the time is now for conscious parenting and for conscious parents to rise up and to take back our pregnancies and our births and our parenting and the resilience of our children and of future generations. The time is now. We change the course of history by changing the course of our future generations. And we do that by consciously raising them, consciously birthing them, consciously conceiving them, feeding them good food, and taking back the responsibility of raising healthy, well-adjusted, robust people. Resilience. It's time to build resilience. So please go check out sovereigncollective.org/get the guide, and you will be able to check out all of the amazing material in there. It's time for us to understand how our worldviews are formed, how our self-views are formed, and how to impact that and how that impacts the society on a whole. So check it out, sovereigncollective.org/get the guide. And now on to the show. Hey everyone, Sasha here, new interview for the Sovereign Collective podcast. And I'm very excited about this one. It's one I've been wanting to do for a while, and it's on the topic of iodine. And some of you, I know you know a little bit about me. I have a history in chemistry, as that's my degree, and I work with people with their nutrition. I work a couple days a week at a shop, great supplement shop in Calgary, and I do a lot of health classes. And one of the ones that I did most recently was actually on iodine in last month or the month before, and was very well attended. And I will be doing another one at the end of November, just so you know, at Lotus Herbal Health. Contact me if you want to know more about that. Anyways, I have been doing lots of deep dives in a lot of different areas for a long time, and I've been aware of iodine for a very long time in terms of its importance for breast health and cancer protection. And of course, thyroid, we always think thyroid, but there's so many other things. But what I didn't do, and I can't believe I didn't do until now, was really go down the path of how much iodine, what sources of iodine, I didn't know. I just followed the gurus out there and did these little amounts of iodine, and I really didn't know until I started going down the path of iodine and seeing people, clients, customers, and seeing that they had some very clear iodine deficiency symptoms, very obvious. And they were working with natural health practitioners that weren't addressing that, which is even more frustrating. I can't even believe that, because even the natural health practitioners aren't understanding, I think, the fullness of the whole iodine topic. So I started reading books, and one of the books that I read was Lynne Farrow's book, The Iodine Crisis. And this is my guest with me today is Lynne Farrow, the author of the book, The Iodine Crisis, What You Don't Know About Iodine Can Wreck Your Life. I also read Dr. Brownstein's book, Iodine, and also just listened to a lot of interviews and reading some research studies and things like that, and just getting more and more upset and frustrated with the lack of even the so-called natural health gurus not really going down the path of iodine, because as Lynne Farrow refers to in her book, The Iodine Crisis, we are in an iodine crisis. It's very clear, and it's for several reasons, which we'll talk about in the interview. So let me introduce Lynne before we start getting her wisdom shared with you. So Lynne Farrow, like I said, she's the author of this book, The Iodine Crisis. And what you don't know about it, she put the subtitle in, what you don't know about it might be wrecking your life. And because that's exactly what it was doing for Lynne, and we'll hear from her story directly, but it is quite a doozy of a story. And through a series of unfortunate events and diagnoses and things like that, the path of Lynne Farrow's life really changed when she discovered the necessity of iodine. And now she's plays a really big role in educating the masses about the importance of iodine. She's a whistleblower, a journalist, researcher, a former college professor, and speaker. And I would also like to add in somewhat of an iodine historian, because I think a lot of what needs to be brought to the forefront is the history of iodine and its use in the past. She's currently serves as the director of Breast Cancer Choices, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the scrutinizing and reporting of the evidence for breast cancer procedures and treatments. And there's no pink ribbon in their logo. And she's also the editor of iodineresearch.com, which is a wealth of iodine info research, and also I think heading other forums and groups as well, or associated with them. So we'll talk about those as well with Lynne in the interview. So thank you, Lynne, for being here today. I am really looking forward to this interview.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Anytime I can coherently make a presentation that isn't like a drive-by, take iodine willy-nilly, I always look forward to speaking to people who are already in the field and they know how slippery information can be, and know how to like pick out where the holes are, because they've usually had frustrations in their own health. So I'm looking forward to today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, and it is slippery and it's really interesting. It's quite devious, I find. So how did you become so ingrained in the iodine? Let's hear about your story and where you came from and how it impacted you so greatly.
Well, growing up, I was always sort of on the sleepy side. I would be the first kid to fall asleep, and I was always cold. I mean, I led a normal life, but you know, the people around me, the children around me, weren't as lazy, sort of the kind of thing. But then, but I functioned fairly well until I hit adolescence, and then I noticed, you know, there's things like breast pain and weight gain, a little bit of weight gain, that kind of thing, being cold all the time. And so that's how I was as a child. And then as I grew older, as an adult, I noticed brain fog, something that back then no one even knew the term brain fog, but I never made any connection. And then later in life, as I would go to doctors, like in my 30s, I went to different doctors complaining about brain fog or this or that, you know, all different things. And they pretty much shrugged. Apparently, there were a lot of us complaining about the same thing, but nobody really found a unifying theme to this kind of thing. So then I got older and I was working at a college, and it was just so hard to get there all the time. I mean, I would make it, but I just was too tired and foggy to get through my classes. So I left, and I was a freelance journalist for a while. So that meant I could sort of sleep on my own time, and you know, it was easier to arrange my life. Well, in the middle of that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I'd had the cystic breasts for years, and everyone said, "Oh, cystic breasts have nothing to do with breast cancer." And then later, I found out that cystic breasts can present and develop into fibrocystic breast disease, which, when the cells start mutating a little and changing and just getting hinky, you know, disorganized, that's a risk factor for getting a certain kind of fibrocystic breast disease that within a year or two often proceeds to breast cancer. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer, looked around, tried to find, you know, because I was trained in sociology and philosophy, to try to ask questions and find out what assumptions are. So I went to these different doctors after I was diagnosed, and they really couldn't answer my questions. And I had to learn the terminology and things like that. So I wound up just getting surgery for my breast cancer, and I didn't use any of the radiation or the chemotherapy that was recommended. So during this time, I figured I really have to up my game in research. Also, adrenaline is very good when you get breast cancer because it cleared my head a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I went to a conference, and here's the turning point in your life. People always talked, in movies and stuff, like this is a turning point, and I never had a turning point in my life. And then you might not know it when it's a turning point. So I would go to these different medical conferences, and at one, I found a speaker, and I was just fascinated by her, and I asked questions of different people about, breast cancer, and the speaker came over to me and said, where do you work? Who are you? So I guess it was something in what I was saying that she knew I was looking for, causes and evidence, and which is not usually talked about very much. So what she said to me was, have you looked into iodine for the breast? And I thought, well, I'd heard about iodine for fibrocystic breast disease, but that has nothing to do with breast cancer, right? And she says, well, you got to look into it. And I thought, look into it. I have a nonprofit. We've looked into everything. And so I was almost insulted, but I went home and I figured I've got to look into this. I'll spend a couple of weeks, and I'll research everything she said. Well, the 2 weeks turned into 2 months, which turned into 2 years, which turned into my life work. So looking back on it, and I became an iodine information activist out of that. Looking back on it, that was really a turning point in my life, which I never expected. And in order to do this, which you mentioned, I had to look into the history of iodine. Well, that's just generally the way I approach everything anyway, is to look back to where you first see the mention of iodine, for example, with respect to the breast. And it's very tricky because you can't just look in the medical literature. You have to look really all over the place. And I was even looking in papyruses from Egypt, ancient Egypt, where they mentioned seaweed for the breast. And then I would go up and I'd go back even further to in Chile. They were using it, they were traveling and there were iodine healers. They just used different seaweeds. And it was really a universal nutrient. It's like the oldest traditional medicine. But you didn't hear about that because nobody was doing the history of iodine. And so after doing that, I decided I found out there were a few doctors that had the iodine project at the same exact time that I was looking at iodine. They were also doing research, but you have a chemistry background. They looked into everything. They knew how to really screen the research for juicy stuff. And then I contacted them. We had an iodine conference in 2007. We had 2 of them actually. And all the nerds came out to discuss this. Well, that was very nice, except these were really strict evidence-based doctors. And I knew no one would listen to them, but they would listen to me because I could say things without losing my license because I didn't have a medical license.
Right.
And that's what got me, after I had gathered all this information for a couple of years, that's what got me to write my book, the Iodine Crisis. And the reason it's called the Iodine Crisis, this isn't an exaggeration. There is a crisis. And what happened, I'll sort of launch into this like where this whole crisis thing came from, bringing it up to the current day. If nobody's really interested in the ancient Greeks or the Egyptians or the Chilean Indians, bring it up to the current day. Like, why are we getting all these iodine deficiency diseases? So I looked into this, and I worked with Dr. Brownstein and Dr. Abraham, who were the pioneers in this, to find out what they were doing. We sort of cross-researched. And I found out that in the 1970s, now here's the crook, this is why it's a crisis and not just a deficiency. In the 1970s, iodine, which had been fortifying bread for years, was taken out of it. Now that wouldn't be so bad maybe, but they put in bromide. They bromated the bread to make it sort of fluffy. And then it was put in wheat flour generally. So if you baked cookies or whatever you used flour for generally, and getting a nutrient out of the flour, you now got anti-iodine properties. You got bromide. So that's one thing. It's huge, just because how much wheat is part of our lives. But at the same time, in the 1970s, bromide is introduced as a fumigant, as a fire retardant, as a pesticide. It's put in Mountain Dew, bromide vegetable oil. And so bang, I mean, you have another hit to create iodine deficiency, a crisis. And then I noticed, and there was a huge, reduction of things that came together. A study came out about this time. It's from a government nutritional agency called NHANES, and they measured the iodine. Like in the 1970s, they measure urine, just randomly for people, and they would measure the certain amount of iodine. So you know how much people are getting from that. And then go up to 2000, there's 50% less iodine in the urine. So now we know people are taking from 1970s to 2000, 50% less iodine. That's a huge decrease. And that's like a perfect storm where all these things come together, unrelated. The fire retardants in everything, in cars and computers and in all upholstery and rugs back then. So at the same time, there's a parallel. So you have this removal of iodine as a fortifier, and the addition of iodine to the environment. It's like almost like a global warming thing, like a DDT thing. The addition of bromide in these pesticides and fire retardants, and you get, in the same period, you go to the National Cancer Institute and they'll show there's 180% increase in thyroid cancer. And I called the statistician there.
Well, when was the increase? Over what time was that 180?
The 30 years between the 1970s and the 2000.
Okay.
And so that, so this 50% decrease in iodine is really causing problems. And you look at this, as I said, if you look at just the cancer per se, that's only one thing. So I called the National Cancer Institute and I spoke to the statistician there. And I said, I'm looking at the math between 1979 and I got that there's an 80% increase in thyroid cancer. That can't be right. And he said, no, what you have to do is you multiply this by this, and it's 180%. And he like jumped out of his shoes. He said, I didn't really notice that. Because he has every single cancer they do the statistics on.
Right.
And so I realized that this was important. So I went around and looked at the other diseases. So that's, of course, thyroid disease. But there is a huge increase in breast cancer and just general hormone problems. The number of people that were infertile grew. And we have a real connection. I've just seen this since I started, since the book has been out, the number of people who contacted me who were able to get pregnant after taking iodine. Because even if you're a little iodine deficiency, the chance of maintaining a conceived egg in your body is not that good. So that sort of sums up how I got here.
Wow. And I think I say your story is a doozy, and I think what people need to hear also is like, you couldn't do your job as a professor, so you changed your job, you lost your license, you walked around with a hanger in your jacket all day without even knowing it, and people pointed out to you. So you were really impacted to the point where, when you were obviously to the point where you got the breast cancer. So people are walking around with these problems all the time, thinking, they're hormonally deficient, or they're depressed, or they need a pharmaceutical drug to fix them, when really it's a major deficiency. And like you said, it's a double whammy. No, first of all, our soil, if you're inland, you're not
right
consuming iodine, and then they took it out where they had it in, and then they add the anti-iodine anti-nutrients in there. So it's just it's kind of, it sounds like, I don't know, maybe it's a little calculated, but that might be just my dark side coming in. But so yeah, so like you have now with the iodine. So can you tell us about your story about how you discovered what happened when you first took your iodine and what that did for you?
Well, the first time I took it, I had taken a little bit, like the Lugol solution, willy-nilly, like 10 years ago, but it was basically for killing microbes in your food. I had been trying everything, so that was my familiarity with iodine up until that point. But then after the iodine conference and realizing all this, I tried a tablet of iodoral, which is, it's Lugol's iodine, which is the main form we use, in a tablet form, and it has a coating that protects your stomach if you happen to have a sensitive stomach. So there's a test called the iodine loading test, and I signed up for that. And on the morning of the test, you take a tablet of iodoral iodine, and then you collect the iodine for 24 hours. You collect the urine for 24 hours in this gallon jug. And, you sent a little sample of that off into the lab, and they measured and see how deficient you are. Well, I wasn't really paying attention. I hadn't really talked to anybody about what would happen in the test. And within an hour and a half of taking that 50 milligrams of iodine, I just had this huge clarity in my mind. It wasn't like a coffee-like stimulant. It was just like everything sort of seemed clear. And then of course, I took more when if I feel this good, I could feel great. You can't take too much of it at a time. You have to know what you're doing. But that really clicked on me. Every bit of brain fog was gone. But the more important thing is about how cognitively it impacts you. I think I mentioned this in the book, where I would get impatient if other people couldn't multiply 30 times 30 times 6 or something like that in the drugstore. And they would pull out a calculator. But I wouldn't have noticed that like a week earlier.
Wow.
And so that it really helped. And so that was a huge thing. But other things went away, I had a little cyst on my skin. That went away. But the thing that I loved most was I was no longer cold. Don't forget, I had been to thyroid doctors, everything, I've been to every single doctor, you could think of. And nothing had changed really significantly because I didn't have the iodine to make the thyroid medicine work.
Right.
So that really changed my life. A lot of things changed, but I wasn't sleeping all the time, and I wasn't trying to plot my day through when can I rest, that kind of thing. So, but that's I think what you're asking about, the sort of boing effect I got when I first took the iodine. And other people have reported that too. Not everyone reports it. We don't know if the people that get the boing are the ones that are most efficient or not, or it's just their brain that's the most efficient, so they feel it there.
Right. And 50 milligrams. So the RDA is 150 micrograms, and that's very, very significantly higher dose. A lot of doctors think, no way, you can't take that much iodine. That's gonna blow your thyroid up. That's gonna do all these problems. So what do you have to say to that? So let's talk about the ridiculously low amount that's recommended, and people are following it. And not only are regular doctors following it, and they've been like the holistic
people haven't read enough about iodine, and they think it's some kind of additive or that will shut down your thyroid.
Yeah.
I mean, I did run into one doctor socially. I don't think I mentioned this in the book, but I do it when I do talks. And he said, well, you wrote a book on how much iodine do you take? And I told him, at that time I was taking 25 milligrams a day. And he said, no, you must mean micrograms. Or if you have more than 1 milligram, it's lethal.
Lethal.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So he had learned that you'd be dead, he said. And well, anyway, so you can see how this goes when you're talking to people who have no sense of iodine. And they just, unfortunately, because of something that happened in the 60s, the Wolff-Chaikoff effect, that these doctors did a study on mice, they got it wrong, and even the language that they spoke on, you could see they were sort of shifty about it. But because the doctors, one of them was at the National Institutes of Health, this was widely accepted, and 99% of doctors out there have studied this in medical school. They probably know what the Wolff-Chaikoff effect is. And that is the theory that if you take iodine too much, it will shut down your thyroid, period. And there's still doctors who insist that, even though their patients will come in and say, well, I've been taking 25 milligrams for 6 months, and I don't think my thyroid's shutting down. I feel really good.
Right.
I'm not sleepy. I'm losing weight. I mean, it's not from weight loss, but if your thyroid is very suppressed just from living and environmental things or any other thing, you will get a boost from the iodine, and your metabolism is increased.
Yes. Yes, I had to personally, I worked up to 62.5 milligrams recently, but it was kicking my butt. And I took a few days off and I just started up again at 25 milligrams because I don't drive a new car. I don't live in a new house. I've been eating organic food for 30 years, but I'm getting little cherry angiomas everywhere. I was getting tired. I was getting like little breakouts and well, big breakouts actually on my face. So and I have some people that I'm working with, and I feel like it's almost even my experience is people have to start even more slowly now because there's just so much out there that the iodine is going to push out. So what is your experience with starting people at these doses? What do you recommend people start at to safely, and we'll talk about the companion nutrients afterwards.
Mhm.
There are people, you don't just take iodine on its own. There's other things you need to do to properly organify it in the body. But how do you suggest that people start?
In my book, I say start with 12.5 milligrams, which would be like one 12.5 milligram tablet.
Right.
I mean, there are people that have started at 50 and done fine, but there are people that even taking 12.5
Yes.
when they first start, especially if you're particularly, filled with bromide,
Yeah.
your gut, you get what you described is called bromide acne. I mean, a dermatologist would even tell you that. But the salt water loading should take care of that. And of course, you always you never take iodine without taking selenium with it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the companion nutrients, but that's the most important of the companion
The
nutrients.
most important. Okay.
Or also, I've found that if I take too much iodine, I get brain fog. So in other words, so there's still bromide in me that the iodine will displace. I mean, eventually it gets rid of the lion's share of the accumulated bromide of your life. But you get to a certain point where you're fine and you don't have to take the salt loading at all.
Right. And it does take a while to actually bring the iodine up to a significant, to properly load the tissues, I would say, with iodine, right? It's not something that
Yes.
you can do in a month or 2 months. For some people, it can take years. Is that correct?
It can take years. You really, with the test measures is that cell saturation. Now, but that can be different for everybody. So I mean, we have this test that's standardized, but there's still individuality and people's exposure. I mean, there's a nurse who had gotten chemicals from the operating room that she was in, or people that have been in hot tubs every night of their life for the last 20 years, because
Right.
the hot tub cleaner is bromide. But yeah, but that's the main issue or concern that people have coming to iodine is they take it, they don't know what they're doing. They, maybe, even a well-meaning doctor or practitioner will say, oh, here, I tried this and I was fine. And they'll take it and they'll get what you suggested, they get like bromide acne or a rash, just bromoderma, that's called.
Right.
So you just have to slow down. I mean,
Right.
even if you're taking it at 12.5 milligrams every other day.
Right.
Or if you're stopping weekends, sometimes stopping for 2 days, it's this pulse dosing method that I explain in the book. Stop for 2 days. And some people report getting a little euphoric as they get into the sweet spot of just having the right amount of iodine during that 2-day break.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
So,
interesting.
so
And,
that's a tip.
and so for people that are listening and say, well, I don't have a thyroid problem, nothing wrong. I don't need to supplement with iodine. I don't have, what could iodine deficiency look like? Because yes, we always associate it with the thyroid, but every cell needs iodine, right? So
Yes, every cell in your body.
yes. So what kind of other symptoms might be present if somebody is low on iodine?
Well, cold, because you think of what's happened, your body is sort of in a hibernation, literally a hibernation state when you're very hypothyroid. So you're colder, like you're like a cold-blooded animal, literally. I mean, your body, that's a good thing. I mean, your body is compensating and being efficient by making you cold. It's like having a furnace in your body that's taking too much fuel. But some people are puffy-faced. That's often something we see. They lose the outer third of their eyebrow.
Yes.
They may have a little goiter. They may have cysts in their breasts. They may have cysts in their ovaries, and that, of course, that could be an infertility issue. We've had people that have men have testicular cysts, which I had never heard about until we did this work. There's different different joint things that can be involved with your joint. Back of your neck may not be as tense.
Mm,
And basically, the go-to place to look is anything that's endocrine, any gland. I mean, your salivary glands. There's glands around in your face. All these different things are centered around iodine deficiency.
right. Yeah, and like you said, brain fog, right? I saw an interesting, what I didn't realize, I was looking on the iodineresearch.com, and I was looking at the brain section, and what I didn't know is that there's actual local T4 to T3 conversion in the brain. I always associate that with thyroid, but that's also a brain function. So obviously, like with the brain fog and with your Boeing effect, there's so
Mhm.
many people dealing with brain fog, and we think it's candida, or we think it's,
Yeah.
or people are just depressed or something like that. But that's pretty significant as well.
Yes, there are scientists that have been around for years. And I have a bookshelf full of the doctors that just worked on iodine in the brain. The main thing they were looking for was mental retardation, people
Right.
being born this way. And originally it was thought that if you didn't get iodine in the first trimester of pregnancy, that would be the time that would cause mental retardation. But what they found, the public health people decided in Africa and in different parts of Asia, they would go around and give poppy seed oil in iodine. It's called iodiol or something like that, where they put the iodine in poppy seed oil, and it creates a kind of depot in the skin, and it slow releases the iodine. Because these people were so iodine deficient, they didn't quite know how to get them to take it in salt or in something that they would eat in their culture. So when they were doing this, I think I write about this in the book, where they went to a village where there was a very poor village, and one of the families had a child that had, he was actually a grown man by now, he was in his 30s. He had such iodine deficiency, he didn't have the cognition to know to keep his clothes on.
Right.
And so the family was shamed, and it was a very sad story. So the public health workers gave him and everybody else a shot. But with him, all of a sudden he understood, like, oh, I need to keep my clothes on. Just that slight release in IQ, in the whatever the hormones were generated and bypassed, the different receptors in the brain, and now it was making contact with the iodine he needed so desperately. And so then he was able to not only leave the house and be among the villagers, and the shame was decreased in the family, but he actually got a job loading bricks onto a truck. And so the family income was increased by this. Well, the family was so thrilled that it changed their life so much. They walked a mile, of 100 miles, and they walked and walked to find the public health workers just to thank them. I mean, this is all documented in the doctors' books, the public health doctors who study iodine in the brain. That's just a whole narrow area.
Right. Right. Yeah, and there's that other interesting one about interior China where they dripped it into the
Yes.
irrigation ditch, and huge changes in not very long. Like when it's so crazy. Like we know it's the number one cause of mental retardation still in the world,
Mm.
and it's not a hard thing to fix, really.
No, that's what's such a shame about it. I mean, it doesn't require like this great, fabulous diet of organic food and all these elaborate things that we use in the West. It just required. This village in China had been sort of famous since Marco Polo had traveled there, and they reported back then, like, there's all these tiny people and stunted-looking animals around them. And this village in China, the children would either grow very small, or there were miscarriages, constant miscarriages, and the animals would miscarry. So it was hard for them financially to like make it, because if half of your animals are dying because of
Right.
losing the fetus, and your kids are too hard to manage, really, and they're so small they can't do very much. What they did is this is an elaborate public health thing, but one of the things we should know about China is they don't like Westerners coming in and saying, do this, do that, but only because of a very specific circumstance where they really love this public health doctor. And they knew that this doctor would not try to sterilize them like they think people in the West were trying to do. And because of that, they were able to get a barrel of potassium iodate and drip it into the irrigation ditch near where the food would be raised. And because of that, I mean, you just drip overnight, and they would have a little, a farmer sort of sitting on the bridge with just to guard the iodine because it was so special. And within a year, the amount of changes, the people grew, their children grew taller. The animals stopped losing, having miscarriages. The people start, not having miscarriages, but also the kids, to see kids grow 3 inches more than they had the previous year as they were measuring them.
Wow.
Was like, the people there were convinced for sure. And so the cost of doing this was 5 cents per person per year. So
Wow.
that, I mean, can you imagine your whole village being changed because of that?
Yeah, it's a crime. This is a crime, but this isn't happening everywhere. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And so I want to go back to a couple of things. So first of all, the testing. So
Okay.
I was talking to a guy who actually has an iodine company, and he's saying, oh no, the blood, like I think he owns a company, and he owns a chemical company. And I think that's what he knows. He doesn't know health. So what do you say about a blood test? Or what do you say about just say a spot urine test? Or I don't even know if there's other iodine tests out there, but are there, what you talked about the iodine loading test? How does that compare to the other iodine testing options out there?
Well, the thing that most people come to me and tell me is that their doctor checked their iodine level in their blood and they're fine, or they're even a little high. And what they're testing, those blood tests are based on the average person. So around here, in this country and in Europe, the average person is very deficient in iodine. So if you have your average person's blood as being the gold standard of normal, the test is useless. So we have to also, I took the test just to see how it compared to the iodine loading test. And I got in the 3000s. I mean, I think normal is like 50 or something like that. And so, but you can't really even use it for that, though my doctor does use it once in a while to convince people how low they are. So the blood test is certainly out. The urine spot test, it may be a little better, but it's only what your iodine status is for today. It doesn't have any saturation measure. It isn't capable of measuring the saturation. So that really the 24-hour loading test is the best test to get. It's the only one I would recommend.
Right. And that makes sense, because if something is more deficient and you start taking it, then it's probably going to suck it up where it needs it most first. And so if you're not measuring it there, like to me, that makes the most sense. And then, so you're talking legal. So there's a lot of the health gurus out there recommend nascent iodine. And so that's what I did for the longest time, nascent iodine, and not very much. And then I read about, this gland needs this kind and the thyroid needs this kind. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Well, nascent is, I've talked to Dr. Brownstein about this too. We really don't even know what nascent is. It has some iodine in it, but we're not sure how it breaks down finally in the body. I mean, Edgar Casey, years ago had a product that was based on this sort of principle, but it's an unknown. I've seen people take it for their breasts and they don't get anywhere with it. It's such a low dose.
Yes.
You can't risk taking. I wouldn't risk taking it if I, was concerned about any serious health issues.
Right. And it's like the one that I know, for example, is potassium iodide. It doesn't have elemental iodine in it. So can you talk to why we would need elemental iodine?
Yeah, elemental iodine is favored by the breasts, and the sex organ, the ovaries. So if you're just taking the thyroid gland iodine, the potassium iodine, the one they give if there's radiation escaping or something, you're
Right.
just, you're not going to get your best result. You may get some conversion of the potassium iodide, in the body to iodine, but it's really best to take the Lugol's formula. It's been around for like 200 and some years, and it was the most recommended remedy in the Merck manual, which is like the historic medical
Yes.
manual for so many different things. And I mean, I could just talk all day about the different applications, but so to answer your question, that's why we suggest taking the Lugol's formulation.
And does that also go for the prostate in men in terms of the form that is required, the
Yes.
iodine? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And that's a big deal. And also, iodine plays a role in the production of all hormones, right? So in our estrogen dominant society, which is associated with cysts and breast cancer, and the requirement of iodine, it just makes me so angry to think that this iodine has been brought more into the picture, because it's part of the puzzle.
Yes, yeah, any hormone related thing is, especially for women, because the way I characterize it, women have so much more iodine real estate in their body. They have their breasts, they have the ovaries, they have their uterus. So there's like more physical tissues to cover.
Right.
So they would probably need more iodine than men.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. So can we talk about companion nutrients? Oh, wait, before talking about companion nutrients, can we talk about children and pregnancy and breastfeeding and what the requirements are there? Because I know it can really vary. You're saying 12.5 milligrams. Some people need 50, some people need more. But what about children? What about lactating women and pregnancy? And also, what about people that are taking thyroid medication?
First of all, for the pregnant and nursing women, the recommendation is, and Dr. George Fleshes has figured this out, the doctors can safely recommend 12.5 milligrams to those women. And the reason for doing that is so you don't get sued if you're a doctor. It's because people all over the world, especially in Japan, take more than that, just like twice that, more just every day in their lives. So that's considered the safe, as a maximum, the safe dosage for pregnant and lactating women.
Is that something that you agree with? Like, do you, I know you can't give advice here or anything, but do you know of stories where women are taking more and they're fine, or is there dangers of taking more that you know of?
Well, my niece, she had been taking, she was like 32, I think, when she, in her second pregnancy, she had been taking the Lugol's, the iodoral every day, for like 2 or 3 years before she got pregnant with the next child. So she just kept it up because the child, I guess she thought, was an extension of her. And if she was used to getting that much, and she seems to have a very high recommendation, a high tolerance, or her need, when she drops below a certain point of iodine, she feels it.
And what's her level? What level does she need?
Probably about 100.
Yeah.
So she took that, and even after her pregnancy, after she gave birth to that child was much brighter than the other child. I mean, in terms of quickness in grasping things.
Right.
So the IQ of the child is affected probably 15 points or so. So you can, if you have different children, people have noticed that. There was one child, somebody wrote in to the iodine workshop group recently, and with a picture of her child, and it was a picture of her 5-year-old child teaching the other kids chess. So that's how advanced they can be. But I think that answers your question about pregnancy and nursing. Now, children, Dr. Brownstein and I differ about this, because I've seen, like, he thinks you can dose iodine by weight, and a lot of drugs are given by that. So in other words, if it's a small child, it's a certain amount of iodine. But I found that kids are often like adults, that one person can take 50 milligrams and the other can only take 12. So it's by trial and error that I found. And so I have a thing called the heel dosing method. It's on my website, lynnefarrow.net.
Okay.
And what I suggest is like dilute some Lugol's and put it on your child's heel, or you can put it on his tummy with a smiley face or something, but dilute it and then build up so that you don't get any children getting diarrhea because somebody gave them 12.5 milligrams of iodine. I mean, it could be a 12 or 13-year-old who is like close to an adult in body weight, but he's still sensitive and you don't want to trigger anything like that. So we disagree on that particular thing. I'm more trial and error and to see the sensitivity of both the person and the child. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay. And somebody taking thyroid meds.
Doesn't make any difference. About a third of the people, in other words, you can take iodine with thyroid meds. A
Right.
third of the people taking thyroid meds who then take iodine and get established on it, a third of the people will be able to stop their thyroid meds completely. A third of the people will be able to reduce their thyroid meds. And the final third have no change whatsoever in the amount of thyroid meds they need.
Wow.
I
Interesting.
mean, we've studied that.
Okay. And how long, if somebody's going to be, if you see them being able to go off of it, I would think they would be slowly decreasing their dose of thyroid meds over time.
They probably feel a little speedy or something. At some point they feel, or they might forget to take it and not notice any difference.
Ah.
But Dr. Brownstein has actually measured their thyroid levels. In his work, over the last like 15 years or so. I'm sure he backs it up. Not just the clinical impression of they're not cold anymore, they could go off their thyroid, but the actual blood tests for thyroid.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So, so that's good because so many doctors don't want to recommend iodine to their thyroid patients and then they just medicate them, which sounds crazy to me because I would think that that would be the first thing you would do, but then they don't want to combo them. But also, God, I was just going to say something and I forgot. Oh, but also what I think it's in Dr. Brownstein's book, how he talks about is, when you give thyroid meds, you upregulate the metabolism, which increases your requirement for iodine. So it sounds like even if you aren't getting the obvious benefit of being able to go off your thyroid meds, you should probably be supplementing with it to support that upregulated metabolism, I would think.
There's a lot of theories about thyroid med that I've seen different books published and talked to different doctors, and there's just so much variation that it comes down to just trial and error.
Right.
We hate those words, but that's what it comes down to.
Fair enough, but we're all different, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. We're all different. We can't expect it to be standardized for every single person because we're all different.
Mhm.
So companion nutrients, let's talk about those. What are the companion nutrients that help support iodine absorption and conversion?
The companion nutrients main one is selenium, vitamin C, magnesium, and B2 and B3, which you can, that's almost optional, but we ask people to start out with that, because if you're not absorbing the iodine, if the symporters aren't absorbing the iodine, that the B2 and B3 will just like whack the symporters awake. And I think it's better to start, and then if you find you're fine after 3 months, just, you can drop it, or, it's not that important. But it's better to start and stop than be worried for 3 months. Like, why isn't anything happening? Why isn't anything changing?
Okay, that's interesting because I say, well, do it with this, and if you're not getting benefits, then try the ATP cofactors, which is that B2 and B3.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But that makes more sense to me. Let's give you the better chance for success, and then drop it if you need it, and see how that works. Okay. And so, how much magnesium do you think people should take, in vitamin C and selenium?
Well, the selenium is 200 micrograms, and you can even like go off that a little bit. You can, as you go on, just like not take it on weekends, that kind of thing.
Okay.
The vitamin C, we say 3,000 milligrams. It depends. So which would be 3,000 milligrams is 3 grams.
Yeah.
And yes, the magnesium, it depends on what magnesium you're taking, because some are more prone to give you diarrhea than others. And the ones that are chemically altered, and of course, you never take time release magnesium. That's like a night, or time release anything really. Any product that's so engineered that it's time release, you shouldn't be taking.
Fair enough.
So you have to experiment with magnesium. People have there's like a war on the different magnesiums.
Yeah. But it is one nutrient that I think a lot of people are taking these days,
Yes.
because like vitamin D, it's gotten a lot of coverage in recent
Yes.
times. So, okay. And then there's the salt loading protocol.
Yes, that's
I actually drink salt water all the time, and I have been drinking salt water for 30 years since university. It actually changed my life because
Really?
of my hydration and more water balance in my body. So I actually always put salt in my water regardless.
Well, then you're ahead of things. I mean, because it's very hard to get people to realize the benefit of that. But it certainly pulls out the bromide. And I think I mentioned this, that in my book, when some of the soldiers had bromide poisoning, the treatment for that was to get intravenous salt, like saline drips. And that pulled the bromide. And some of the soldiers were crying in their bunks before they had the drips. And others were playing ping pong. They didn't feel they had high bromide in their bloodstream. Some didn't feel it, others were crying. So that's how you're talking about people being different. That's how different poisoning can be to people.
Right. And so, yeah, and that's poisoning. And so all these people with all these mental problems, emotional problems, if we would just look at the poisoning and the lack of nutrients, oh my goodness, I'm sure that would be a interesting study to conduct. So yeah, so that helped them to clear their symptoms and regulated their emotions. I can't remember exactly how that turned out.
You mean with the bromide? Well, in the 1950s, bromide was so much on the market with like stomach remedies and nerve medicine. The 50s housewife was given Nervine, Miles Nervine, which is a bromide product. That when they took the blood, if you decided you were so depressed you would go to a mental hospital, they would take your blood level. They found that something like 70% of the people had high bromide levels.
Wow.
And that's from just taking over the counter products that were making them depressed and suicidal.
Right. Wow. Wow. And add to that the lack of iodine. So yeah, no wonder people. I have actually a customer who came in, she came to my class, and she comes into the store and she says, "You're making me sick." I'm like, "Oh, let me guess. The iodine is detoxing you." And she had to go much, much lower. She went down to half a tablet of the 12.5 iodoral.
Yes.
Then she went to drops that she could dilute even more. And because she read both books, your book and Dr. Brownstein's book, and within the week and a half after the class, she's like, "Everything I have points to iodine deficiency, all my symptoms." And she's been working with a functional medicine doctor and never got on the iodine. I was just so frustrated with that. So yeah, so hopefully she can slowly increase those levels, because for some people it can be uncomfortable. But I have another friend who is taking thyroid medication and she's up to almost 50 milligrams. She's not feeling anything yet. At all. No detox, no nothing. So like you said, everybody's so different.
But there are people who will tell me they take 5 milligrams every other day and they're doing
5 milligrams.
Yes. But that's, that's rare. That's rare. There was a woman who is on one of the groups who she thought she had dementia. She was in her 40s because her husband had to cut her meat for her. That's how weak and foggy she was. And then as little as 5 milligrams, it just turned her life around. She experimented with higher doses.
Right.
She must have just fantastic absorbing tissue.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's so. So is there somebody who shouldn't supplement with iodine? Where are cases where it's dangerous? Can it be dangerous?
Yes, there's one condition, and that's when you have a hot nodule, an autonomous node, they call that. And it's a node on your thyroid that will produce thyroid hormone. So you have to have that surgically removed in order to be able to take iodine. Nobody has this and doesn't know about it. I mean, or maybe in Africa or someplace where they aren't around doctors, you would know about it.
Okay.
Because you don't want to cause hyperthyroidism.
Right. So it's not necessarily that you have nodules, it's that independent nodule that's working.
Yes, it's like a separate thyroid almost.
Wow, okay. And other than that, there's no
That-
other known, but also what about kidney, if somebody's having some kidney failure problems or kidney problems, is that a problem?
Well, the only thing with the kidneys that we found is that the detox might be a little, if you're taking a lot and you're detoxing a lot of bromide, it's going through the kidneys. The Alka-Seltzer Gold, if you take that like once a day, in between meals, people report that like your brain might even clear quickly, or if you feel like achy all over and you've eaten something off, it sort of alkalizes the kidneys. So they work and it dumps the bromide out more efficiently, and whatever other things that are caught up that are negative in your body. It might be killing off parasites.
Wow, really? Okay, I haven't heard that one. Okay. So what about people that are, now I know we're coming to the end, so I just want to quickly talk about your work and where people can find you. So thank you. Like, people start looking into the iodine. Like, iodine is an essential nutrient for every single cell of your body. Most people don't live around marine sources of food and soil. Most people aren't supplementing with very high dose iodine, but most people are around fluoride. In my part of the world, we are facing fluoride getting put back into our water. We're going very backwards in that regard. There's chlorine in things, there's bromides, all these things in the same group in the periodic table, right? They're displacing that iodine. So chances are that you need it. So look into that. So Lynne, if people are looking for more of a community to discuss their issues, where can they find support or communities where they talk to? You talked about the iodine workshop on Facebook.
Yes, that's the only one that I could recommend.
Oh,
because
okay.
because the moderators there, I've known for years. Yeah, they're familiar with my work. They're familiar with thousands and thousands of cases that have come through that group. That's the main one. But keep in mind, if you go to that group, they sometimes will take a break for a couple of weeks, and you might be able not to find the group when the Facebook mechanism sort of like hides it from view, so you won't see it.
That just happened. I actually just recommended it to somebody and we couldn't find it. And then I went into it and it said it was paused. So
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. I want to add one more thing before we wind up here. And that is sometimes people, like if I gave some Iodine to my neighbor and she said, "Oh, I went to my doctor and my TSH level was too high."
Oh, we didn't talk about post-scarcity.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to tell people, say they're taking iodine and they're feeling fine, or nothing's really going wrong, things are improving, and they go to the doctor and the doctor said, "Oh my God, your TSH is at 80. You've got to stop that." That's not what the doctor sees in the blood test. Is not your thyroid getting hypothyroid. It's the body manufacturing more symporters and doing other things at the same time. There's articles about that. There's a great video about that Iodine Workshop runs every once in a while. It's a doctor explaining. I think the name of the video, if anybody wants to look on YouTube, is TSH, Don't Freak Out.
Okay.
So we have to be sure people know that, because they'll think that they're one person who can't take iodine because their TSH rose. That's in my book too, but I didn't make a whole lot of a big deal out of it. But
right. But I think it is like, I actually started to feel something in here and it passed. And I have a friend, who she messages me, she came to us, she's like, "Oh, I was taking my iodine every day. And then the left side of her thyroid swelled up." And she's, "I've never had a thyroid problem," but what she did, she actually cut an onion in half and rubbed it on there for 10 minutes and it went down. But now I think she's afraid of taking iodine. So would that be, are people getting swellings with like what other symptoms from the post-scarcity effect could they get?
If your body has been deprived of a nutrient, and especially iodine, but other things too, when it senses the iodine in the bloodstream, it's going to try to hoard it. Like the thyroid, the blood has been going through for years and it's had very little iodine. And suddenly, so it doesn't pay attention to it because there's so little iodine. All of a sudden it sees the iodine and pounces on it and swells. The tissue of the thyroid swells so it could absorb more iodine out of the bloodstream. as the blood passes through. That's the post-scarcity effect. It's
Okay.
like a sort of a spontaneous goiter. They just like grabs it. That's what the
Wow.
goiters are. They expand to, to get the minimal amount of iodine that's in the bloodstream out efficiently into the thyroid. So your friend, that's what was going on. That will go away. That happens in the breast. People will say, "Oh, I had painful breasts. I took iodine and they swelled up more." Well, they'll go down. Just like go a little slower.
And how long would that? Yeah, so they should back off the iodine a little bit.
Yeah.
And
yes.
how long does this these symptoms generally last?
Not long. I've never heard anyone say, "Oh, I've been on iodine 6 years and my thyroid is still swollen," or
Right.
6 months. Even it just goes away.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because that's an important one, because I think people think they're doing damage when that occurs, and then again, you get scared. So that's a good one to know. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. Okay.
But I've heard about that with the ovaries too. I mean, ovaries, breasts, thyroid. That's the main place that you see it.
Those main concentrators of the iodine.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So your book, everybody, get this book. There's history in here. There's Lynne's story in here. There's the iodine protocol. There's information about bromine and all sorts of different things in here. Such a great book, The Iodine Crisis. What you don't know about it can wreck your life. And for some people, that's literally what is absolutely happening. And that was happening to Lynne exactly as well. She couldn't think straight. She got breast cancer, all these different things. So Lynne, where else can people find you for more information?
Well, I'm on Facebook. You can find me there. Lynne Farrow with an E. And I have a website, lynnefarrow.net, as I said. Facebook, that's pretty much it. But people can always find me. I'm always there. I do answer questions. I'm not at length. I can't give any medical advice, but if somebody contacts me and has a situation, I'm always, eager to answer and help if I can.
And I did recommend the Breast Cancer Choices website to somebody
Yes.
just recently as well, who reached out to me for some help. So yeah, and that's another one that you're the director of that one.
Yes.
As well. So, and great. And looking into what we're currently doing for breast cancer and iodine people, iodine.
Yes.
That's
Well,
great.
the good news of that is that since the website went up in the last 10 years, they've now introduced iodine as what they call an adjuvant therapy for it's been clinically tested and trials. So, and it's working. The people taking iodine for breast cancer, they take the conventional medicine too, but the people just doing the conventional therapies alone are not doing nearly as well to the people that have added iodine to the protocol.
Okay.
I mean, that should be on the front page of the New York Times or any Times.
But it's not. But it should be. For some reason, it's not. But yeah, interesting. Okay, Lynne, that's amazing. I think this is something that just affects everyone, like pregnant mamas out there. That's one of the things I think about. The first thing these days is get yourself on iodine. Like, it's amazing how resilient the human body is, considering, how much is needed and what we can get through with how much poisoning is in the environment and how much deficiency we're actually dealing with, because I think it's more than we realize. So yeah, but for some people, that could be your ticket, right? You can't hold a pregnancy, or you've got cysts or things. So thank you, Lynne. I really appreciate your time. I know this is going to help a lot of people out there and open their eyes, because I think there's a little bit of a fear around, like, as you say in your book, iodine's been stolen from us, right? And there's fear around it. So if people can just start empowering themselves with listening to this kind of thing and reading your book, I think they'll feel a lot more confident in going down the route of iodine supplementation the right way.
Yes, I just want to get the information out there any way I can, because it does really change your life.
Yes. I think you cut out a little bit there. Okay, just hold the line 1 sec. Okay, everyone, thanks for joining us today. If you find this information helpful, please share it. Please share it. Please use it. Please share with your friends and family, because I know a lot of people can be helped by this information. Again, at Lotus Herbal Health in Calgary on November 29th, I'm also doing a class on this together with tissue salts. But I feel this is really important. I'm going to be shouting this from the rooftops forever, because now I know how important it is for everyone. So please pass it on. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you again. Ciao.